Let a few folks trickle in. Good morning, everyone. It is nice to see you all. The VMware User Group, or VMUG, is an independent, global, customer-led organization created to maximize members' use of VMware and partner solutions through knowledge, sharing, training, collaboration, and events. And without further ado, I'll pass the keys over to Joe.
Great. Thank you, Tristan. Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Joe Comps. I'm a cyber threat analyst here at Vali Cyber. And today I'm really excited to talk to everyone about hypervisor ransomware protection and what we're doing at Vali Cyber to revolutionize security for hypervisors. Now, Vali Cyber was formed in 2020 to create effective and efficient security security solutions for unprotected and underprotected critical infrastructure. And as we've been doing that over the past 5 years or so, we've ended up shifting our focus specifically to tackle the lack of the hypervisor ransomware protection and take on that challenge heads on. Now, you might be asking, well, why hypervisors? What's the big fuss about that? Well, over the past 3 years, there's been a significant increase in hypervisor attacks, specifically targeting ESXi. We've seen global brands like Panera, Omni Hotels, and Marks and Spencer get attacked. We've seen a rise of state actors that are starting to focus on that attack vector, going after entities like the Florida Supreme Court or MITRE. And with all these attacks, we're starting to see associated substantial financial and data impacts because of the devastating blast radius that occurs when you actually do target these hypervisors. We're seeing hundreds of millions of dollars of losses from Metro Powerhost or MGM Resorts, and most notably being Marks and Spencer. The attack cost them roughly around $402 million, which is about half of their annual profits. So it's definitely becoming a favored target for these threat actors. Another reason for that is, it's not that it's just a significant blast radius. It's not a secret that Broadcom and VMware, the ESXi hypervisor itself, makes up about 84% of the total market share of hypervisors. So when you look at it from the perspective of a malware author or one of these ransomware organizations that runs very similar to any other organization, they're going to kind of go where the market is, so to speak. They're going to see that if 84% of this vulnerable type of system that has such a significant blast radius is the ESXi host, well, they're going to craft malware and these ransomware strains specifically to target ESXi because they know that they have the highest chance of success in those avenues. Now, as they're conducting these attack campaigns and ransomware campaigns, we're typically seeing there's 3 prominent ways that these breaches will start. And the first is credential compromise. Now, this could be stolen credentials. This could be Active Directory compromise that leads to lateral movement. This could be lack of a multi-factor authentication or something like password reuse, or sometimes even just leaked credentials from, it seems like every day there's a large organization that they get breached and all of a sudden all their data is exposed on the internet. And now you're getting these notifications that your password is out there and all this information. Attackers love to get that information and use that as their initial foothold in an environment. So credential compromise is definitely a big one. Another one that we see is misconfiguration of the actual ESXi environment itself. Now, this could be, running an environment that has secure boot disabled, or, maybe you have SSH enabled, or you don't have good proper, firewall rules in place, or maybe just bad network segmentation. As a member of the threat intelligence team, a lot of times we use a tool called Shodan to essentially see any endpoints that are active out there just open to the internet. And I can't tell you how many times we see upwards of tens of thousands ESXi hypervisors that are just openly exposed to the internet due to poor network segmentation and those misconfigurations occurring. So that's another thing that attackers are definitely looking for. They're trying to see kind of the easy win there. And then finally, the third thing is vulnerabilities. If there's some type of new exploit out there or new zero-day, we just recently had the Pwn to Own that happened in Berlin, and a bunch of vulnerabilities targeting ESXi came out from a lot of very talented researchers, and that's the stuff that we know about. But there's plenty of exploits that could be out there in the wild that, we don't find out about until, unfortunately, it's far too late in our environment. So these techniques, these attacks, these techniques, they've become so prevalent recently that organizations like MITRE have taken note. And for the first time ever, back in April, MITRE has included ESXi specifically in their version 17 attack framework. And this really validated the risk that many of us ESXi users have been facing as attacks at the hypervisor level are on the rise. If you haven't taken the time to check it out, I highly recommend it. The new framework, it's pretty fantastic. It includes 12 categories that focus on, the different steps that may be taken during an attack chain. So it's a great playbook for defenders to kind of understand the thought process behind what the attackers are doing when they move to compromise something like ESXi. And it's a kind of a great step-by-step to see how different options they may, binaries that they utilize or executables that they may use to try and get. So this is definitely a landmark move that will have rippling impacts on the ESXi security compliance. Usually when MITRE gets the ball rolling, the compliance and regulatory agencies tend to follow suit. But the unfortunate reality is that if you're just simply relying on regulatory security compliance requirements, that really isn't going to be enough to protect your environment. So take, for example, let's talk about firewalls and just kind of network protection. I've talked to a lot of people, and when we have these kind of conversations, they kind of ask me like, Joe, why do we care? What's all the fuss about? We have a firewall protecting our environment. Well, frankly, like firewalls and standard network protection tools are great. We're not saying you shouldn't have them, but they're just not enough. And they don't really give you visibility inside trusted connections. So firewalls themselves really focus on that north to south traffic, inbound, outbound connections, but they're not paying any attention to that lateral movement, the east and west traffic. So in the event that SSH is being misused or credential abuse is occurring, that's not going to be detected by a firewall. What we were talking about earlier, credential compromise, that's, a firewall is only so good as the credentials are. If I have valid credentials and I can, log in via whatever VPN connection or thing that I have, that's going to go totally unnoticed. What I like to reference a lot of times is an example of, you can have all the best security systems in your house. You can have all the cameras and state-of-the-art locks. But if you leave your back door unlocked, or you leave your keys, which are the credentials, underneath the mat, then an attacker is going to be able to get into the house no problem. It's worth noting that firewalls can be attacked too. We see regularly vulnerabilities and exploits are coming out that are targeting various types of firewalls, and attackers can use those as actually a jump-off point inside of your network. So relying on that single control point is definitely risky, which is why having a layered defense is essential. And understanding that advanced threats like ATPs or some of these more prominent ransomware threat actors, they can actually mimic legitimate services as well, like DNS, SNMT, or SMTP, or any of those services. So it's kind of a brief prelude to just say that you really want to focus on having that layered defense. So take, for example, and we'll do a kind of a quick dive into an attack that happened not so long ago in the MGM breach. That's a breach that can definitely be instructive for enterprises. Now, this occurred a few years back in October 2023, and it culminated, the final action was encryption of the hypervisors. It ended up costing MGM well over $100 million to recover, not even accounting for the ongoing, legal fees and the fallout that they have to deal with from that. But I know we've got a bit of a complicated chart here, but I'll briefly kind of just get through it. Essentially, what happened is the attacker group, Scattered Spider, what they utilized was not complex social engineering and phishing techniques. They conducted a SIM swap. They captured some phone communication with that SIM, and then from there they continued what's called a vishing or a voice phishing attack, targeting the support desk of that MGM resort network. From there, they were able to reset multi-factor authentication after they had targeted specifically that IT admin, gaining their credentials, bypass that MFA, and were able to access the cloud services, attack the domain from there, and eventually gain credentials that enabled them to go into the vCenter environment and launch their ransomware attack. And It's a bit of a complex attack chain, but ultimately what it really boiled down to is that you had someone that, the human factor that was able to be vulnerable, that was able to get their credentials compromised in this event. And from there, you had an exposed network that allowed them to access a vCenter server and launch that ransomware. And so we're going to kind of do a quick demonstration of that right here. So here we have a vCenter console. We're going to log in with our administrator credentials that, we either phished or we stole or we got from a password dump. And the attacker here is presented, with the vCenter account. They're going to kind of look around, go to the configurations, scroll down for a bit, and this is where the misconfiguration comes in. They're going to go in and they're going to enable SSH. So even if you're doing the right thing, right, if you have SSH disabled, if an attacker gains those keys to the kingdom, they can just go in and use the tool as it's designed and activate SSH. So now they're going to enumerate the VMs a little bit, and they're going to see that Walter White VM that's going to be their target for this attack. And while they're doing this attack right here, they're going to log in with their SSH. They're going to change directories over to the volume, go to the data store. And from here, they're going to see that Walter White VM. And now they're going to do something interesting. Let's see if I can pause here real quick. I apologize. What the attacker is going to do right now is he's going to launch something that's called a living off the land attack. And what a living off the land attack is they're going to utilize native binaries that exist on the hypervisor itself. So they're not going to import any malware. They're not going to do anything like that. They're going to use the tools that exist on the ESXi host by default and use the tools against it. So if you look at the command line here, I know it's a bit of a jumble, but we'll walk through it. They're going to grep for specific files that match their criteria. From there, they're going to utilize the OpenSSL binary to actually encrypt the files that they want to target. They're going to in place the password that they would want to utilize in this situation. And then from there, they're going to append this little nuclear radiation sign to all of the encrypted files. And then they're going to remove all the files that are not encrypted. And as they do that, once they launch that attack, it usually takes it a second or two. But as they have that going, there we go. As quick as that, now, as they list out the files, you can see all the encrypted file VMDK files right there with that nuclear symbol. So if they go back to the vCenter and they go to power on that virtual machine, they're going to be met with an error and operation failure. And as simple as that, that's how quickly it can a ransomware attack can actually occur with binaries that already exist on the host. So, if you're ever presented with this kind of attack, or if you want to, defend yourself against this kind of attack, we always say it, you want to patch it as long as your environment, your infrastructure supports it. You want to patch to the newest available release from Broadcom. You want to ensure that you have your systems hardened, you have the configurations correct. You want that firewall in place. You want SSH disabled. You want to ensure that you have good configuration. You want to segment that network so that it's not visible to unnecessary parts of the network, which are all great defenses. But I think it's fair to say that most of these things occurred. MGM, they weren't asleep at the wheel. They're a very robust organization. They had all this stuff. But one thing that they were lacking that potentially could have saved them those hundreds of millions of dollars was having a runtime protection solution. And that's where ZeroLock comes in. And that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of the presentation today. Runtime hypervisor ransomware protection, it does exist, and it exists within ZeroLock. ZeroLock allows you to improve infrastructure resilience and reduce risk by securing any Linux-based hypervisor that we have here, including ESXi. So whether you're running Proxmox, KVM, or any of these things, if it's a Linux-based hypervisor, ZeroLock can give you that ransomware protection and that runtime protection solution. Now we have a signed VIB with Broadcom. It's a pretty simple deployment. I'll talk about it in the next slide here, but we are deployable via vCenter, and we're very excited to be a VMware Technology Alliance partner. So ZeroLock itself, it's very, very low impact management. And in a couple of slides, I'll kind of talk through the layers of defense and how it actually operates. But worth noting, it's very minimal overhead. It's 50 megabytes of RAM and less than 5% of a single CPU core. It has a very user-friendly and an intuitive web-based console that gives you that flexible management. It comes out of the box with just best-in-class protection. So our default configuration, we're continuously, I I'll be honest, I was working on it yesterday. We're always looking at, new ways to improve that, new potential attack surfaces that on ESXi, new ways that we can protect that hypervisor. And we include that as a part of that default configuration. But we also give you, the flexibility to, if you want to manage it a little bit more or be more stringent, or maybe you want to allow certain things, we give you that flexibility as well as the customer. Another great feature is the API first framework for your SIEM and SOAR integration. So, we get, especially, SOC teams or, defenders, it's good to have that single pane of glass view where you don't have to go through multiple different solutions to get your alerts, to get your logs. And so, we take that into account. So we can integrate with, Veeam, Splunk, Swimlane to give you that solution right off the bat. So all the alerts and whatnot will go to whatever solution it is that you're using. And we try to keep it lightweight and portable. So in the event that you want to change up your infrastructure, we can lift and shift with little to no headache at all. The deployment, it's very, very streamlined. ZeroLock has been built to be deployed efficiently, because we leverage a containerized portal that is cloud enhanced rather than cloud dependent. So we can be deployable on essentially any Linux-based hypervisor environment out there. If you look at the Broadcom compatibility guide, you will find us. We are certified on ESXi 7 through 9. We do support ESXi all the way down to ESXi 6.7. However, we're not certified on that simply because Broadcom, they no longer support that, so they won't provide a certification for that. But in the event you're running 6.7 in your environment, we can support that as well. In terms of deployment, it is a single agent deployed across the environments. One-line deployment can keep it very, very simple. We can deploy through the lifecycle management center through vCenter. And as I alluded to earlier, we do have a signed VIP through Broadcom. So aside from that, if you just want to do a single edge deployment directly on the ESXi host, that's also something that we offer and we enable. So really the deployment can happen whenever you're ready and no bottlenecks at all. And from here on out, I'm going to actually talk about how the product works and kind of the meat and potatoes behind it. So we have that multi-layered approach that is vital to protecting ESXi. So instead of relying on that single point of failure, we have multiple redundancies that are designed to protect that environment. So we can prevent a lot of attacks right off the bat with our first, we like to call this graph on the right of the screen the onion. So our first layer of that onion is, we have a SSH multifactor authentication solution. From there, we have application filtering, lockdown rules that give you that fine-grained access control. And then finally, we have real-time protection with AI behavioral detection that coincides with our automated remediation, which gives you that real-time file rollback and persistent threat removal. Now, in the event that you have a fully or properly configured and fully deployed ZeroLock agent on your system, you will have 100% protection of the MITRE ATT&CK version 17 TTPs covered. And we'll talk about that a little bit further here. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is, sorry, I do see I'm getting a lot of questions, folks. I'm gonna hold off until we get to the end of the presentation. I promise we will get to them once we hit our Q&A. But if you look at the solution here, we're going to talk about the SSH MFA solution. So first, this right here is the ZeroLock console itself. This is the management console. You can see the endpoints that we're monitoring here. And what we're going to focus on right now is this ESXi 7.0 build. And what we're going to do is, we're going to come over here and see that we have a bunch of different VMs, Frodo, Gimli, and Gandalf. It is, we're nerds over here at Vali Cyber. We're going to SSH in, and typically you're just going to be prompted with your username and your password, and you have access. But this time something different happens. You're going to be prompted to provide your ZeroLock username. You input your username, and now you're going to be prompted to enter a code from the Authenticator app. And this whole action here, like this is the ZeroLock's SSH MFA solution in effect. So even in the event you have a situation where an attacker is able to get in your environment, they're able to access your hypervisor via vCenter, they enable SSH, and they try to log in. Well, now they're going to be stuck with this. And we support any authenticator apps such as Google Authenticator, Duo, Okta, Microsoft Authenticator to kind of give that first layer of defensive, preventing the attacker or giving them another hurdle that they have to try and get around and have to figure out. So that's ZeroLock's SSH MFA solution. Next thing we're going to talk about is application filtering. So in this specific demonstration here, the attacker is going to use wget to download the defray ransomware. They're going to try and chmod exit and then execute it. But immediately they're kicked off the system. And this is, once again, ZeroLock in action. So if we go over to our alerts page, we see that there's an alert that's been blocked. This executable itself has been blocked. We can see these files that were affected. And this is a feature that I absolutely love. This is the process tree, and we can see each process that was involved in this alert and this activity that occurred. So we click on it, we can see the file hash information, any arguments that were presented that show us sort of that diagnostic answer of what occurred up to this alert happening. It's a fantastic tool. Anytime you're getting those alerts, it shows you every associated process and child process. And even me personally, like in the event I want to do any kind of malware analysis for my own job, I can set up a sandbox environment, have ZeroLock running on it. I can detonate malware within my sandbox environment. I can actually use this process tree as a diagnostic tool to see what was the malware doing, what network connections was it trying to make, what files were it accessing. So it really is an awesome and intuitive feature that I personally am a very big fan of. So that's the application filtering. Essentially, it's saying that anything that is previously not on that system, any executable an attacker would try to import onto the system, if they try to execute that executable, ZeroLock's going to say, nope, you weren't originally here. We're going to go ahead and block that. So that's the application mechanism in action. Next, we're going to talk about lockdown rules. Now, as I said earlier, lockdown rules are those fine-grained access control rules that define when an application is allowed to access certain files, or which programs are allowed to run, and what network connections are allowed to make. So in this demonstration here, we're going to see, once again, we're going to be on an ESXi host, but this is going to be an ESXi 6.7 host as opposed to the 7.0. And similar setup, we're going to have our three VMs, Gandalf, Frodo, and Gimli. And over here, we're going to do something different. The attacker's going to set two windows. First thing is their netcat listener. It's going to be waiting for a reverse shell. They're going to pass that uname tac-a command so that when the shell connects, you're going to see that they connect to the ESXi host. And now they're going to target specifically a vulnerable service, right? The OpenSLP daemon. And what this exploit is going to do is, this is a real world exploit you can find on GitHub. And it's essentially a memory address leak exploit, or an information leak exploit. The attacker is going to try and leak information to then write this reverse shell that you see down at the bottom, this make not bin sh. And there they have that connection, right? They have remote code execution on this host as a root user. So what they're going to do now is they're going to try and pass a command to shut down the hosted VM so that they can launch a ransomware attack. And when they do that, all of a sudden their shell immediately drops, and now they don't have access to the hypervisor anymore. This is ZeroLock's lockdown rules in action. So if we go back over to the host, go to our alerts page, we can see here that program execution, the attempt to shut down a VM from a command line interpreter, has been halted and it has been remediated. Now, what this demonstration kind of shows is that think of it as a simulation of, like, we'll say a 0-day exploit. In the event that something occurs that there's a vulnerability that Broadcom's not aware of, that the rest of the industry isn't aware of, instead of focusing on specific executables or specific hash files or something like that, instead, the next layer of the ZeroLock onion is going to focus on attacker behavior and activity. So even in the event that they have something that grants them remote code execution as root, we have a series of rules that are focused on MITRE ATT&CK TTPs or other suspicious attacker activity that we've observed over the years that falls outside the normal realm of what somebody should be doing. So the reason why we focus on that one specific rule is that when an attacker is trying to launch ransomware, one of the first things they have to do is actually shut off the VMs that are hosted on the hypervisor, because when the VMs are on, the VMDK files are locked. So you can't encrypt those files when they're locked. So the attacker trying to go in and turn that off is suspicious activity. So we have a rule in place that will protect against that, along with a myriad of other rules. So the next thing that kind of goes hand in hand with this is virtual patching and how lockdown rules are a mechanism for addressing virtual patching. So we're going to briefly kind of talk about this. Virtual patching has been something that has been kind of it's a buzzwords that's been going around a lot lately, and really all that is that it allows you to patch systems and prevent exploitation without modifying the system code or without requiring an update. So earlier this year in March, Broadcom and CISA announced that there was 3 critical CVEs that could be leveraged into zero-day exploits on the hypervisor. When they were announced, they were able to release patches, but these exploits had existed in the wild for some time, and these were sandbox escape vulnerabilities that were focusing on the VMX process. Now, a fun fact is that if you were a Vali Cyber customer during that time, even before any of the CVEs were announced or Broadcom announced it, the period of time well before all of that, you would have been protected if you had ZeroLock in your environment from those 0 days, because we had already had a rule in place that was monitoring like malicious VMX activity. So, and we'll demonstrate that here shortly, but if you had that installed in your environment and if you had that configured properly, the ability to virtually patch your environment gives you many things, right? It gives you that 0-day defense where you can protect your system before those patches are available. But it also gives the ability to support the unsupported environment, right? So if you have legacy infrastructure that's no longer receiving updates, you can apply virtual patches to at least still have some semblance of protection and control of your environment, even if you're not getting those updates. And then finally, like, we offer the ability to give you that mission critical workload protection. So if maintaining uptime is absolutely paramount to your operations and you can't immediately patch when the patches are available, you can at least take solace in knowing that you have that virtual patch in place that can protect you from these potential exploits. So what we're going to demonstrate here is actually that VMX rule in action. So here, once again, we're in our our ZeroLock console. We're going to look specifically, and what this rule is doing is it's just looking for the source process VMX and targeting anything that comes from that. So if VMX spawns a shell session or tries to spawn wget or any subsequent child process that it shouldn't be doing, ZeroLock is going to look for that. It's going to address that, and it's going to ensure that that doesn't occur. So we have our profile and our policy set up over here. Go back to our dashboard, and this time, instead of focusing specifically on the ESXi host, we're going to transition over an actual VM that's being hosted. And the attacker is going to try and launch this VM 0-day or this VM escape. And unfortunately, they're unsuccessful. They're unable to escape the VM to get to the hypervisor because of the ZeroLock remediation that we have in place. So this rule, we have our alert once again. We can click into it. It shows that it's remediated automatically. We go back to our process tree and we can kind of click through it. We can see specifically the PIDs that are associated, the executables that are associated. So we see that BusyBox initiated a VMX process, which, that's pretty normal. VMX has to function on these systems. But then VMX did something a little bit strange, is it tried to spawn a shell that from there initiated a netcat connection, which we know is not standard activity within. No, that falls under the criteria of the rule that we have in place to say this is attacker behavior. So ZeroLock went ahead and immediately remediated that. So that's kind of an example of what virtual patching can provide you via these lockdown rules. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about here is kind of that AI behavioral detection and the automated, or in some cases manual, remediation that occurs. And this is sort of like the final layer of this onion here. So as you remember, our living off the land attack, where we have we're going to grep for certain files. We're going to try and launch ransomware using against the Gandalf VM, using OpenSSL, using grep, removing the files, appending that nuclear symbol. We're going to run the same attack again and see if we can use these binaries to encrypt the host. But immediately now we're kicked off, and this is ZeroLock's AI behavioral detection in action. So when we click on this alert over here, we can see that it's alerting for ransomware, and it shows you all the files that are affected. It shows you the encrypted VMDK files with that little nuclear symbol. It shows all the other files that were accessed, and to the right you see that it shows them as pending. And we can see that our process tree, once again, BusyBox used all these non-malicious binaries, but it used them in a malicious way to actually launch that ransomware attack. So we go over to the host and we try to turn it on. We can see that it failed to power on the virtual machine. And so it's a successful ransomware attack. We're kind of no good. But now we have this get out of jail free button. We have this remediate button that we press, and all these files that were affected go from pending to now it shows that the original files were restored and the encrypted files were removed. And so now if we go back to this virtual machine, we click the power on button, we can see that, even though it takes a little bit to spin up, that successful ransomware attack, in a matter of seconds, we're able to immediately recover due to the ZeroLock's file fallback feature. And now we mitigated that ransomware attack in a matter of seconds. And we showed it that you have to manually click the remediate button for the purpose of this demonstration. But you can set up all these rules, and we typically recommend that you do, to just auto remediate. So right as that encryption attack or that ransomware attack occurs, you don't even have to go in and do anything. That remediation automatically occurs. The encrypted files were removed, they're restored to their previous state, and you're back in business. And one final kind of bonus thing that we're going to go over is our anti-tampering engine. And this is just kind of to mitigating any attackers that get bright ideas. So if someone tries to go in there and they try to find the ZeroLock process itself, we can see that there's the PID, and they try to kill the PID. Sorry, we have that protected as well. We're not going to allow you to tamper with sensitive files. So that's part of that AI behavioral detection, but that's specifically the tampering engine in action. And so yeah, that's ZeroLock. Before we wrap things up, I want to ensure that we let you guys know that hypervisor security and the environments, keeping them secure it's absolutely paramount to who we are at Vali Cyber. We really, really care about that. So even if you get nothing else from today's demonstration, take the time to ensure that, as I talked about earlier, there's a lot of these endpoints that are exposed to the internet. Take some time to ensure that, go on Shodan or double check your environments, check your segmentation to ensure that you are protected, that your networks are segmented, and it's just not open to anyone on the internet to go ahead and view. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and start taking questions, and I appreciate everyone's time. All right, Megan, I think you're on mute.
Hey guys, for those of you who don't know me, I am Megan Howard. I am the VP of Marketing with Vali Cyber, and I'm here to help Joe moderate all of the great questions that you have. So Joe, we've got a question from Henri. Can you enable ZeroLock MFA with vCenter and LDAPS authentications?
Great question. So I know that our ZeroLock MFA is specifically SSH MFA. So it's designed to protect any of those SSH sessions that are occurring on the hypervisor. Right now, I don't believe we support anything beyond that, because, and the reason behind that is typically there's not an ability to have that MFA for those interactive shell sessions, but there are other ways, other mechanisms to have MFA for something like vCenter access. But as far as I know right now, I don't think we do support vCenter MFA, but we do have that SSH MFA solution readily available.
Okay. And then we are getting a lot of questions just asking if a copy of the presentation will be sent out. Yes, VMUG will be sending you guys a copy of the presentation. So no worries, that will land in your inbox. We also have a question from Michael. What solutions are supported for MFA, or does it provide its own facility? By this, I think he means what apps, authenticator, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so we support the solutions. It's like I said, it's Google Authenticator, it's Duo, Okta, Microsoft Authenticator, really anything that is kind of like your standard out of the box authenticator applications we do support. I've used pretty much all of them when I'm in my lab environment. So yeah, and anything that you can just readily download on your phone that's common usage is what we support.
Perfect. And there's a question about what our licensing model is. So we license per core. And that's gradated based on the number of cores that you have from a pricing model. And so we'd be happy to dive into that further with you if you'd like to set up a conversation or a demo with our team where we can dive more specifically into your environment. Todd, you're asking if we'll be at VMware Explore. You're my favorite. Yes, we will. We actually have a suite at the Venetian if you'd like to come and get a demo. We will be there in full force. Our CTO, Austin, will be there, our CEO, Anthony, and then Jason Dean, who is our directors of sales for the West. So we would love to see you there. Let's see. Lawrence is asking, is there a VMUG or training license for internal training use? Lawrence, that's a fantastic question. So what we do have set up specifically right now for VMUG members is that you can apply for a free license for ZeroLock. So I will drop that link if you give me just a moment. I will drop that link into the chat. So anyone who would like to apply for a free license for ZeroLock so you can kick the tires. Typically, we have it up for, you know, a couple weeks or so that you can test it out. Give me just a moment. I'm just pulling up the link. Are there any other questions in the meantime?
Let's see. I'm scrolling back to see if we missed anyone. I just saw Greg's comment. You know what else has layers? A parfait. That's absolutely right, Greg.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
You
Love it. Absolutely love it.
Let's see, we got MFA solutions, recording, shared, license model. We covered that. Push notifications by Travis. Are we able to support push notifications? I'm honestly not sure. That's a good question. We might be able to, but you know, for everyone's awareness, unfortunately, I'm not an engineer. I'm the threat intelligence analyst. So there's some features that are even new to me sometimes. I'm like, oh, I didn't know we could do that.
It was Travis. Yes. Travis, we can, you know, that is a great question. I don't think that's currently part of our product support, but our product engineers are always looking for feedback and how, you know, and taking in comments for the roadmap. So, you know, that's definitely something we can pass along and put on their radar. Timothy was asking, are you on NYS OGS contract? Is that New York State? Fellow New Yorker on the call. Love it. You know, I got to take a look and I will circle back with you on that specifically, Tim. I got to take a look at that. I know we've done a bunch of different contract works with different states, and so I need to look at New York specifically to give you a firm answer. I think so, but I want to double check it. Let's see.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah, does it support other virtualization platforms? The answer is yes, absolutely. We do pretty much everything with the exception of Hyper-V, because Hyper-V is Windows-based. Vali Cyber started as a Linux security company, so Linux really is our bread and butter. So if there's any kind of virtualization platform out there that is Linux-based, like Proxmox, Nutanix, you know, KVM or Zen Server, any of that stuff, like we do support that. But Hyper-V is not going to be one of the ones that we do support. VM Essentials.
Yeah, so for those of you in the marketing world, there's a terminology called ABM, which typically stands for account-based marketing. But in this particular instance, the short version, ABM, is basically anything but Microsoft. So hopefully that's another way to answer your question. Let's see, asking about VM Essentials from HPE.
Unfamiliar with that.
I know, that's a great question.
I'm not certain about that one, Travis. What I would say is, like, if it is Linux based, yeah, then we would support that.
Yeah.
And then Mariana has a question: does it support ESXi version 9? Yes.
Yep. And then another one from Todd about forwarding to a Sentinel as the SIEM. We are totally built API first, so we can definitely plug into, SIEM stores that you have built. We understand the last thing you guys want is another individual tool to have to manage. And so we've designed ZeroLock to be able to accommodate those needs. Let's see. Lee was asking, where are the remediated files stored?
That's a great question. So as files are accessed, essentially how ZeroLock works, like the file cache, the way it works is it's a file cache rollback. So as files are accessed, whether malicious or non-malicious means, ZeroLock will make a copy of it, and we'll store it actually in the data store 1 and make that as essentially a protected or a sensitive anti-tamper file location. We recommend that you size the cache as large as your largest VM, but it's all configurable by the user. So size, location, rollback, all that stuff. You as the user can decide like what your appetite is and how large that cache is, where it is, how that rollback occurs. So that's kind of like how the remediation file storage works.
Awesome. Let's see, following up on that, can you offload the remediated files to an appliance instead? For instance, like Cohesity NFS share?
I don't think we have that yet. But I'm going to make a note of that and see if that's something that we have.
Yeah, Travis, we can circle back to you on that specifically. Let's see. Lawrence was asking, are all these virtual platforms managed from the same instance or one for each virtual platform? So it's all single instance. That goes back to our deployment and management model, because we're cloud enhanced, not cloud-based. We're able to kind of do a single agent for everything.
Right. So if you have like an air-gapped environment or anything like that, you can operate that way. But essentially, excuse me, the ZeroLock management console is going to be a single instance, and then you can deploy the agent to reside on whatever it is, other like VM that you're interested in protecting, or hypervisor, I should say, that you're interested in protecting.
Let's see. Again, asking if the API will work with the CrowdStrike SIEM. I don't know if it's got CrowdStrike specifically built out, but we can absolutely get that built and plug into anything.
API functionality is pretty, it's
incredibly
flexible. I know the developer team is continuously like reviewing and adjusting as needed. So we try to stay as flexible as possible. So, but we do want to ensure that we integrate with pretty much any SIEM that we can.
Yeah. Let's see, for the restore option, is that leveraging snapshots? Are there additional capacity requirements for that feature? Go for it.
Yeah. So it's kind of back to that file cache thing. It's not snapshots specifically, right? Because it really is more file focused, because everything on Linux is a file. So when this ransomware is encrypting something, the way the detection engine works is it's looking for entropy levels. So when it detects that files I won't get too much into the engine itself, but it's specifically the file rollback is looking at those files. So when you encrypt things like the VMDKs or anything like that, anytime it's accessed, we're just going to be making copies of those files and storing them in that cache feature. So in terms of storage, the recommendation is that whatever the size of your largest VM in your environment, that's what we would recommend the size of your cache be, to kind of mirror that. But ultimately, like the capacity requirements, they're up to you, however much you want to be able to protect yourself.
Yeah, perfect. I did just want to mention, somebody had said, oh, the link that I put in, the valicyber.com/VMUG wasn't loading. You know what? It is, it's just for whatever reason, our site is a little slow right now. So I actually just pinged our website manager and he's taking a look. It looks like maybe our server host is having a little maintenance thing happening right now. So it definitely loads. It's just the 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 lovely life of living on the web. Let's see. Any conflicts with existing endpoint protection, such as Sentinel-1? I don't think so. We haven't heard any issues regarding that. Yeah, in any of our POCs, that has always been a streamlined experience for folks. Let's see. Will you be expanding to VMware appliances like NSX? We'd love to. You know, we're right now we're really focused on ESXi and the hypervisor, especially given, you know, as Joe mentioned, all of the attacks like Scattered Spider that are happening. But you know, we're not stopping here. It's just where we are right now. So yeah, we definitely would love to. All right. I think that kind of wraps up our questions, Joe. Any final thoughts or anything you'd like to share with the group? We really appreciate you guys hanging out with us this morning, afternoon, and evening, depending on where you're located. So thanks so much for joining in.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Great questions. You know, I appreciate you all taking the time to come out and hear a little bit about what we're doing. So thank you so much.
Awesome. And then just so everyone knows, this session was recorded. The recording will be distributed in a wrap-up email soon after the webcast, as well as slides if you'd like that. Please fill out the survey once this webcast ends. This helps us provide you fresh, relevant content in future webcasts. And then lastly, use code COMMUNITY in all caps for 10% off a 1-year VMUG Advantage membership. So thanks again, and hope to see you guys on the 14th.
Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you in a few weeks.